So before I get into this week's hot takes, as I'm sure most of you guys saw last night, the Bulls did not, and I repeat, did not get lucky in the NBA draft lottery to move into the top 4, which would have meant that they got to keep their pick rather than trading it to Orlando. And the reason that I emphasize that they did not get lucky is because if you tuned into my live stream reaction video last night, you might have thought that the Bulls did in fact move up into the top 4, which was an epic failure on my part, but also made for a hilarious video where I can now go back and make fun of myself, considering it took me about 2 whole minutes to realize that the Bulls didn't in fact move into the top 4, which of course makes the blow to the Bulls sending the pick to Orlando even worse, but hey, maybe it'll make for a fun story someday. Anyway, essentially I was explaining how if the Bulls pick isn't called by the 8th selection, that they would have moved up into the top 4, because again, the way that the NBA draft lottery works is you were only able to move up into the top 4s, and the reason why Arturis had those 2 first-round picks protected that they traded to Orlando. So the Bulls pick would not have been able to land between 5 and 7. They had the highest odds to fall at number 8. So when the 8th pick was revealed, I was only focused on it not being the Chicago Bulls logo, because in years past, even if a given pick was to be conveyed to another team via a trade, they still showed the logo of the original pick, and then you would see that the moderator would then clarify that pick will now be traded to X team. So I didn't even realize it was the Orlando Magic's logo. All I saw was there wasn't any red on the sheet coming out of the envelope, and this is how I reacted. If they're not announced here, that means they are in the top 4. Come on. Yes! The Bulls are in the top 4. Of course, I was so wound up thinking the Bulls had jumped into the top 4 that I didn't even pay attention to what was being said on the broadcast, partially because I had the volume on pretty low and because I was so hyped that we landed what I thought was a top 4 pick. Like in my mind, I started going to, who are we going to be trading this pick for? Hell, are we even going to get the number 1 pick and draft Cade Cunningham, until reality finally set in. Oh, wait. I'm so dumb. That sucks. I should have been reading your guys'. That sucks. So yes, embarrassing, but how can I have fun without making fun of myself a little bit here and there on the channel? Also, since when did they start switching the way that they did the envelopes like that? Maybe I just never noticed it before because the Bulls were never in a position for where they were last night. Either way, the Bulls didn't land in the top 4, and their first round pick, which we knew likely would be the case anyway, will be going to the Orlando Magic. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get into your hot takes for this week. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Our first hot take comes to us from Kyle Moses. Zach Lavine will end up meaning more to the Bulls franchise than Rose did. Well, first of all, Lavine has to make the playoffs before he even means more to the franchise than someone like Luol Deng even. Second, a lot of it depends on how long Zach stays with the franchise and whether he can actually potentially win a championship for the Bulls, because you have to realize, despite Rose not ever winning a championship in Chicago and having a relatively short career with the franchise and a really short peak at that, he was absolutely loved by the fans in Chicago because he's a Chicago native. He brought the Bulls back to relevancy, took them the furthest that they had been since the Jordan 90 days, and he won an MVP at the age of 22. He was also just such a fun player to watch and an incredible talent. And he was just a super nice guy too. Like, how could you not root for him? Now, I made a video a few weeks back talking about Rose and how he doesn't fit the Bulls roster, and it wouldn't make sense to pursue him in free agency because I had so many Bulls fans asking me about this. Should the Bulls go after Rose in this upcoming free agency offseason? And boy, the backlash I received for those comments, so it made me realize Rose is still viewed as a legend by Bulls fans and will always be their MVP. So the point of me saying all this is Lavine has some big shoes to fill. It wouldn't be just making the playoffs. It wouldn't be just getting multiple all-star appearances. He would really have to carry this team to some deep playoff runs in the way that Rose did. Next, we've got Britton Parker. Patrick Williams in a couple of years will make all-team defense 1, 2, or 3. Well, they're actually isn't a third team all defense selection. You might be thinking of all NBA selections in which they have 3 teams that are selected for that. But as far as Patrick Williams making an all defensive team in a couple of years, it's a bit of a stretch. I think that's pretty soon, but based on his solid defense in just his rookie season at 19, I could potentially see in 2 years' time him making an all-defensive second team. First team, no. I think that that's really, really soon. I mean, you really have to be one of the best defenders in the league playing elite defense on a nightly basis, and in just 2 seasons, I don't see P. Will getting there. I think he can get there at some point in his career, but a couple of seasons from now, it's too soon for that to happen. Next, we've got Dakota H. The Bulls should regret not seeking Seth Curry and should trade Seth Curry and Matisse Thybulle for Sato, Lauri, Thad, Aminu, and some fries. Well, as long as it comes with some fries, then we're golden. But no, honestly, you have a point. You know, Seth Curry would have actually been a really good option this past offseason for the Bulls. Obviously, he's nowhere near his brother's caliber of play in Steph Curry, but he's becoming a very solid player and shooter in this league that the Bulls really could have used as a strong sharpshooter off the bench. That being said, it wouldn't have really addressed the Bulls' defensive issues by bringing in Seth Curry. But I like where your head is at in all this. You know, the Bulls should now give him a chance, especially given he's on a relatively cheap deal and he's shooting 45% from 3. That's incredible. He is 30 though, and you'd have to think that the Sixers likely aren't going to be looking to trade him, but are more focused on moving Ben Simmons. But adding Matisse Thybulle, I actually think he would be a very nice fit with the Bulls because of the energy he brings and the defensive skills he possesses. This was just his 2nd season in the league, and he was already selected to an all-defensive team. He's kind of a non-factor when it comes to scoring, but as long as we still have our main scorers in Lavine, Vucevic, and Coby White, then it shouldn't really have that much of an impact. Again, I don't think the Sixers would take this trade though, because it's a lot of players, but really the only guys who would add value to their roster are Thaddeus Young and Lauri Markkanen, and really Satoransky and Aminu would be more of a burden for them by taking on their bad contracts. Next up, we've got Christy Ellers. If Tom Thibodeau wasn't fired by the Bulls in the 2015 season, the Bulls would have at least made it to the semifinals in the 2016 season. So by semifinals, I assume you mean like the semifinals of the actual NBA, meaning the conference finals and not the Eastern semifinals. So if I have that correctly, well, it depends on a number of things. So, for those who don't remember, the Bulls, after having gone to the 2nd round in 2015 against the Cavs, and despite Rose hitting that crazy buzzer beater to give the Bulls a 2-1 lead in that series, the Bulls went on to lose the next 3 straight and were eliminated from the playoffs in 6 games. Now, the front office at that time, Gar Pax, decided this was the time for them to fire Tom Thibodeau after consistently not being able to make it out of the East. Although, what did they really expect when Rose was injured for most of his tenure? But be that as it may, they fired Tibbs and brought in Fred Hoiberg to replace him, and they decided to run the exact same team back. Literally, virtually every guy on that roster returned to the lineup because they assumed the problem was Tom Thibodeau. And then if you bring in a coach who is the exact opposite of Tibbs, that this would be someone who could make them actually defeat LeBron James and finally win a championship. Well, the decision backfired, and the Bulls went from being one of the best teams in the East to not even making the playoffs that first season under Hoiberg. Rose was later traded, and they let Joakim Noah walk in free agency that offseason. So that's the background in case anyone wasn't familiar. But as for your take, if they had held on to Tom Thibodeau one more season with the same group of guys, would they have made the conference finals? I honestly don't know if that would have really made that much of a difference. I mean, yes, the team would have performed better than they did under Hoiberg, and at least they would have made the playoffs at a minimum. But the conference finals, I think the thing that team struggled with was that they had a hard time figuring out who the alpha dog was on the team and the challenges that Rose and Butler faced on whose team it was, because by then Butler was clearly starting to become the best player on the team, but because it was Derrick Rose, this was his team, you know, for so long, and you couldn't really help but think that it wasn't. So there was this power struggle between those two guys, and they honestly just didn't play that well together on the court. On top of that, Noah really regressed that season, so it's not like we would have had the Defensive Player of the Year Joakim Noah in, you know, the 25-16 season. And then Gasol, who although was still very effective given his age, even he has started to decline as well. The team just in general did not fit well together, and I think that's why they ultimately decided to blow that team up. So a long-winded response to your take, but in short, no, I don't think even Tom Thibodeau, you know, with him coaching the team, that they would have made it to the conference finals that season. Playoffs, yes, but making a deep run like that, I don't really see it. Next up, we've got Kurt Morrow. The Bulls should hire Mark Jackson as their next head coach. No, I really don't like Mark Jackson as coach at all, to be honest. I know most people will say, well, he built the foundation for the Warriors dynasty and he just doesn't get enough credit for that. Yes, but there was a reason he also got fired, and there's a reason why he's never held a head coaching job ever since. He's good at motivating players, I agree, which is something the Bulls need, but he's really not that great when it comes to the X's and O's of the game and constructing a sound system that's best suited for his guys. And, you know, we've only had one season with Billy Donovan. You got to give him at least one more season before we write him off. I could potentially see Mark Jackson coming on as an assistant coach, but as a head coach, I would just rather have Billy Donovan at that point. Let's do one more. This one is from The Game. The Chicago Bulls dodged a bullet by trading the 8th pick to the Orlando Magic, since whoever could get drafted at the 8th spot might not even fit the Chicago Bulls. I was actually surprised that there weren't more hot takes after last night's lottery results, especially hot takes at my expense for my failed realization of us not getting a top 4 pick. But as for the take, I mean, sure, of course we're going to say that as Bulls fans after the fact, because you never want to lose a lottery pick, but at the same time, it's not like we lost it for nothing, right? I mean, we still got Vucevic in return, an all-star big man who I do think in the long run, really starting next season, will show to have been a benefit for the Bulls. And yes, it's possible that number 8 pick may, you know, not really have turned out to be anything, or like you said, they may not have fit the roster very well. Although if the Bulls had the pick, they likely would have just selected the best player available. But either way, it's why I always say the lottery is such a crapshoot. And yes, that number 8 pick could turn out to be a decent player in the league a few years from now, but I'd rather not waste Lavine's prime and have someone like Vucevic on our roster right now, someone who is an established player in this league. I'll end it there for now though, guys. Be sure to leave any hot takes you have in the comments on this video, or any of my videos for that matter, and I just might include it in next week's hot take series. I do these hot take videos every Wednesday, so make sure you're including your takes in the comments. Also, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, as always, and I will catch you in the next one.